That is an individual that can be filed under intellectuals to whom one should owe attentive respect. The world of dark matter is coming apart like a star says goodbye. Much of the news, including that quote, came on this year's Dark Matter Day, an especially difficult one for the world's most funded science projects. But let's wrap it all back up for a moment and take a look at what is happening in the world of physics, because it has become clear to me and many others that the people at the various peaks of this field are not communicating with one another. At all. Here we will go into the unraveling realm of the lambda cold dark matter model, which has been the costliest failure in the history of astrophysics. Billions spent on machines that find nothing at all, and so knowing that there have been those out there saying that would be the case since they wrote the checks, let's allow one to explain what happened here, from his perspective, in his best judgment. So this is the universe, right? Most of the universe is supposedly energetic, and yet not electromagnetically familiar to us. And most of the remaining energy mass is one that weakly exerts a glue-like gravitation on galaxies and creates large-scale structures like the cosmic web, but which doesn't interact with light or other particles in any way with which we are familiar. They call it dark matter. The rest is what we would call normal matter. The single most important point from most observers' perspectives has been the dark matter. While some exotic particles and a sterile neutrino have been theorized, they haven't been found and are only slightly more prodding to one's logical side than WIMPs or axions, which also didn't exactly pass our smell test, at least not as described by the detector makers, and which have not been found either. And indeed, all of those reports you've seen in the news recently from every major effort on Earth, in labs, and in space that failed to find dark matter, they were all either hunting axions or some form of WIMP. But there used to be another pillar in this foundation, and while it won't look anything like it once did, it needs a good polish and reintegration into the evaluation. Machos. Massive compact halo object. Initially, this was thought to mostly be black holes and brown dwarfs, but those were conclusively shown in the 1990s to not be able to match observations of effect. In fact, Machos have been entirely out of the discussion and equation changing for at least a decade, when a Magellanic Cloud survey put the brown dwarf and black hole abundance and influence theories to rest. However, since that time, we've learned that red dwarfs are harder to see than expected, still have stellar influences nearby, and are so well known now to be far and away the most common type of star in our galaxy that the fact isn't even cited in many papers anymore, it's simply a fact. And yet, this information really came into existence in 2013. The Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, among some others, have not had their work on red dwarfs properly included in the most important equations. These are normal matter, but have been dark, meaning undetectable, until years after such machos were eliminated from being a potential factor in dark matter. And that goes for rogue planets as well. Last good data on them in that model is from 1999, and it calls them unassociated planets, a now relatively unused term indicative of the outdated nature of the macho exclusion itself. Most scientists think at least twice as many rogue planets roam the galaxy as stars, and the evidence on that number being closer to 100,000 to 1 is shockingly convincing. That is a ton of material we don't see, don't have modeled, and is considered dark, but doesn't require a mysterious new particle that violates everything else we know about science. Carnegie Mellon, we're listening, see? So to stop and catch our mental breath here, so far our fears about every lab, ground, and space-based dark matter search have proven out. They have all failed. So let's peek in on some of the other blasphemous dissenters of dark matter, like us. We've seen dozens of papers and articles like this, but the ones we find most interesting are always the ones about electricity. Electric currents are indeed one of our points to watch for a major breakthrough from literally the first physicist who manages to look there with the right tool. The key is that with the effect on matter comes the disguise of the current. Just like I burned toast and ate it anyway, you can detect the essence long after any evidence of the causation can possibly be found. So what is this disguise? Well, there are two. Let's begin, and it's basic stuff that electricity attracts water and other materials, but it also perfectly diffuses and reconstitutes amplitude and voltage across multiple jumps, with not memory or programming indicating it do so. How do you find the current inside the water? Is it not there? How do you characterize it in spread? More practically, We know current will translocate and deposit material into new regions it would have never gone before. And once the current dissipates or breaks or otherwise disappears, you'll be left looking for imaginary particles forever to explain the effects you are seeing. Of course, this implies that the world's best are looking for and unable to find something as simple as electric currents in space. Seems like we've danced into crazy town and are insulting them now, so just hold that thought for another minute. Let's review the final frames of this shutout loss for dark matter. Not only did they not find any in the cosmic web, but they found much of the missing protons and neutrons, and finding them there means that they are not diffuse and random, but something took and kept them there. When the most powerful detector ever finally debunked one type of axion, the most likely for those proponents, by the way, that wound up an unimaginably expensive failure that makes what we spend on climate change look like child's play. The number of secondary costs and grants and papers and research awards and other titles and positions that have been earned through nothing other than work on now debunked science is far more staggering. And while those with excellent working models that do not need dark matter or dark energy are ignored and completely outside of the game, sitting at the kids' table, every one of them is closer to the truth than what we have now. The work out of China on the gamma background interpretations must not be ignored, as literally everything from past years on dark matter involvement with that data belongs in the trash. Sorry to be frank, that is just a fact. When you have Hubble and ESO level scientists using the best technology and seeing blatant contradictions to the cold dark matter model, and then write about it in press releases, one must wonder what these scientists are actually waiting for at a larger scale. How much more funding goes to this before the failures require a grand reconsideration? Okay, 1 minute is up and we're back to this. We've clearly come close to the line of insulting the world's best scientists, considering that for everything about which we've been correct, to be one step further correct would mean these folks don't know what they're doing. I'll save you the time of reading and get this over quickly. We put a magnetometer on the Cassini satellite. We flew it to Saturn, sent it directly through the water jets at the south pole of Enceladus, and they only found 5% of the currents that exist there. The rest was hidden by a local, magnetized or charged dust particulate around and interacting with the signals and particles themselves. That's dust in space, confounding us in our own solar system while sampling in situ. And by the way, our star is inside a local magnetized dust cloud of the galactic arm, not unlike the dust that shrouded the Enceladus currents. And we have the audacity to think we can spot all the currents throughout the cosmos. If the current attracts these particles, and then the current has its own stealth mechanism for hiding its existence, and we all see what is the pattern left behind and then go searching for something that isn't there, that's a big problem. There is no scenario where these two realities can coexist. And so the next time you see a paper like this, seemingly insulting to the entire world of dark matter and dark energy scientists and the billions we've spent on them, maybe you should take it seriously. Given what has happened thus far and where it appears the best pathways forward can be made, 4 things are of critical importance in astrophysics. If we are 5% at Saturn, we've got zilch across the universe. We need to figure out how to begin tackling that monster before we begin inventing new playmakers. The macho correction is unlikely to solve all of the dark matter problems, but between red dwarfs and rogue planets alone, we see a lot of left-out normal matter coming to light in the last decade. For the love of all that is holy, anyone not heeding Alphin's warnings in the first 20 pages of Cosmic Plasma are doomed to be making the same mistakes over and over again. And lastly, when the theories we're working with have vacuum energy 100 orders of magnitude off from observations, better known as the vacuum catastrophe in physics, that means you don't have the slightest clue what energy underlies the matter we recognize, what fills the gaps between atoms and between the nuclei and electrons in atoms. It's so far from a realistic grasp on the numbers that I actually think it insults the rest of the world to proceed as though it were. Best of luck.